Don't forget, go to Telegram and X and YouTube and everywhere for our poll of the day. Would you buy a used Tesla from Donald Trump? Also, call in the U.S. phone number +1 844 944 3344. UK is 08081 965522. And of course, the international number worldwide is 0044 203 966 2625. Let's start with this. We've got to start with Yemen. In the last 24 hours, President Trump followed in the footsteps of the Biden administration by bombing the poorest nation on earth, resulting in the deaths of civilians. And he advised Iran to stop supporting Yemen or face consequences. What does that mean? We don't know. Face consequences. We know what it meant under the Biden administration. We know that there are people in the Middle East, that there are people in the Israeli government, people in the various governments throughout Europe, and certainly in the United States blob that want war with Iran. But that's not what the MAGA coalition voted for. And Donald Trump told us to measure him, his words, to measure him based on the wars that he started and the wars that he ended and how he kept his word. I thought it was an honorable thing for Donald Trump to give us a metric and a standard by which to measure his success. And last night he got an F. So let's see how things continue. Certainly there's a lot going on in the news, and we're going to try to deal with it as best we can. But Yemen certainly is bad. And of course, as we know about the people of Yemen, about Ansar Allah, they are likely to retaliate. And are we going to get into a war of all things with Yemen? Let me add this. You know, in hindsight, and I'm sure you've heard there are a lot of people who looked at the debacle that was leaving Afghanistan, but said, I'm glad we're leaving Afghanistan. We're getting out of Afghanistan. And as soon as Ukraine fired up, the inclination was to say, well, that's what it was. They were closing down one war so they could go to the next one. Well, there's got to be people thinking that also. They've got to be thinking, oh my gosh, he wants to close down the war in Ukraine so he can move all of the equipment over and open a new war, as if there isn't one already going in the greater Middle East. So we're worried about it. I think those of us who did or didn't support Donald Trump should do the best we can to hold him accountable, and we'll see how that works out. We'll continue following that. We've got people on today. We're going to talk about that in our final segment with Jamal Thomas, amongst other things. All right, Kurz, let's talk about this. What's going on there? I think we've got a turning point here. I really think we have a turning point, and I'll tell you why. Because there's been a predominant narrative in the West, and this narrative has been the Russians are inept. They are, they're not good at warfare. Certainly there is a historical precedent that would argue otherwise, but that they're fighting with shovels, and you've heard all of that stuff. Washing machines, we got to take the washing machines, take the chips out of them and use them for hypersonic missiles. What the heck kind of let me just say this. What the heck kind of chips do they have if they'll run both a washing machine and a hypersonic missile? I don't know what they are, but Taiwan and China are both in trouble. If those washing machine chips will run an Oreshnik missile, I suspect they won't. But at any rate, let's get back to it. This was the rhetoric. And now what do we see? Again, as per the historic precedent of Russians on the battlefield, they have surrounded we've heard different numbers, somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 Ukrainians are surrounded in Kursk. And you've got President Trump calling over there, asking President Putin for mercy. You've got now the big thing that's happened. Emmanuel Macron has come out and demanded that the Russians accept the ceasefire, and I'm pretty sure that now they're meeting in the Kremlin and they're going to say, oh my God, we were really thinking about moving ahead with this war. But now that Emmanuel Macron, look at that, the guy's got a stern look on his face. Next, we're going to get a strongly worded tweet from Emmanuel Macron, and no question, the Russians will fold under such, a vicious power as Emmanuel Macron. No, that's not how it works. What needs to happen now, and I say this because I'm a man of peace. I say this because notwithstanding what position I take on this conflict, I don't want to see people die. I'll say this, Donald Trump said the right thing. People are dying. Ukrainians are dying. Russians are dying. All the Ukrainian leadership has to do is a general order for a surrender. You've got 7,000 to 10,000 people. Of what good, of what interest is it? We understand, those of us who have been arguing against this conflict since, 2014, Those of us who have been arguing against this has said the Ukrainians are cannon fodder. They're being used as cannon fodder. This needs to stop. And let me add this. I got to say this, because I'm sure there are people out there, there's Ukrainian refugees that are in London or wherever the heck they are. They're all over creation in Europe. Some of them are here, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, whatever. Donald Trump is about to deport them back to wherever. But if you're a Ukrainian refugee, you got to think about this. If you're a person in Ukraine, if you're a Ukrainian citizen, you got to think about this. Let me tell you, people that know me, I like to tell little stories and analogy, true stories. So I have a cousin, may or may not be watching right now. Grew up in Baltimore City in the hood. And, you know, at a young age, he was a little older than me, but at a young age, he was doing, unfortunately, what some young men do. He was shall we say, a ne'er-do-well. He was out drinking and carrying on in the streets and getting into all kinds of mischief, right? And at a point in his life, he met a young lady. I'm going to give you the long and short of the story. 5-6 years later, he gave up the bottle. He was going to college. He was married. He had a family. His life was changed. You may or may not agree with this, but he was going to church. It may not work for you. It may work for some. It was working for him. And we looked at her and we said, who is this man? And what have you done with our cousin? Because this ain't the guy that I knew 5 years ago. Now, this may not be making sense, but let me go here. Here's what I'm saying. At some point in the future, we could look at him and we could say he met a woman and 5 years later, his life was different. Was it better? Was it worse? There was a material reality to his life. No matter what spin we put on it, there was a material reality. He wasn't an alcoholic anymore. He wasn't in trouble anymore. And he was moving forward with what could be considered a respectful life. And he was all the better for it. He was healthier. Probably wouldn't be alive today. Here's my point. 2014, some Ukrainian people may call it the Maidan revolution of dignity. Some of us may call it an illegal coup by an external force, maybe even the U.S. empire. I don't care what you call it. 11 years later, there's a material reality. I would ask the Ukrainian refugees, I would ask the people in Kyiv, if you're watching this, is your life better off now than it was when that young, not so young lady showed up on Maidan Square, handing out cookies? A woman came into your life, and that woman handed out cookies to people on Maidan Square. 11 years later, your country's friggin' rubble. You have generations of people wiped out. You got 10,000 guys surrounded by like angry Russians ready to do them in. You've got the president of the United States virtually begging for their lives, asking President Putin, spare their lives. I would have to say this. You got to look in the mirror and say, you know, I don't think we're better off than we were in 2014. Perhaps we should have gone in a different direction. And if, in fact, you come to the conclusion that you should have gone in a different direction, it's time to make peace. It's time to make peace with everybody. It's time to stop hating the Russians. It's time to stop putting up posts online that say we're angry at Donald Trump because he wants to stop the killing and we're the ones getting killed. You're getting grabbed off the streets, mercilessly beaten, thrown into a van, kidnapped, and taken to the front lines. Trust me when I tell you this, that ain't no way to make a living. As Clint Eastwood said in The Outlaw Josie Wales, dying ain't no way to make a living, son. So right now, I'm going to throw this at the Ukrainians. You need to consider the direction you're going. You need to look at the material reality that you're facing as a result of your actions and decisions. I will say this. You've been misled. You've been lied to. There's nothing you can do to go back and fix that. But right now, looking forward, make a different decision. You're going to have to deal with ultranationalists who are violent and who are not ashamed to use violence. In fact, the only power they have is their willingness to use violence. But you're going to have to overcome that and look after your country. That is my advice. Now, let me add something else, and I think is important. I think there's something else that's very important that I have to touch on, and that is J.D. Vance. You know, on I think it was the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, J.D. Vance gave an excellent speech in Munich, an outstanding speech. It was a valid speech. He admonished the Europeans. He said, look, come on, you're censoring people. That's no way to go. Hey, you're Romania. They're trying to have an election. You're, throwing the guy who's going to win out of the election. Probably not a good idea. It's going to come back to haunt you sooner or later. You may get away with it, EU, but trust me when I tell you this, that one's going to come back to haunt you really, really bad. And ultimately, the Romanians will have their day in court. And when they do, the person they choose will be so, and you'll think he'll make Donald Trump look like look like John Bolton and Joe Biden. It's going to be a mistake, and you're going to pay a price for that one. But here's my point. For all that J.D. Vance said, and for all of those, such as myself, who stood up and clapped, there's a hole in it and there's a problem. When J.D. Vance said that, he left open a door. And that door was the door of hypocrisy, that sooner or later, someone was going to come back and say, you're talking about censorship, right? And you're opposed to censorship. However, right now in America, we have schools, we have kids on college camp, young people on college campuses, maybe not necessarily kids, you don't want to call them children, who are protesting, who are utilizing their right to free speech to protest government policy and foreign policy. And our government has reinterpreted protective speech as terrorism, as anti-Semitism. Why? So that they could persecute these people. They went after them for speech, for all the good that J.D. Vance did, and for all the truth that he told. He didn't have a mirror in front of him. Are there any mirrors in the White House? Are there any mirrors in the vice president's mansion? Do you walk by one every now and then, J.D. Vance? I agree with you. You said the right things, and you were right about those things. Let me ask you this. You're concerned about Romania, as am I. What about Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela? The people in Venezuela have repeatedly voted for Nicolas Maduro. You don't have to like him. It doesn't matter whether you like him. Do the people of Venezuela get the same right to make a decision about who they want to lead them? Clearly, they have decided repeatedly that they want Maduro. And what do? What are we doing? We're doing the same exact thing that they're doing in Romania. We're simply saying, oh, he's a criminal, whatever. We just make something up. And we go find another Juan Guaido. You know what? If the EU government wants to follow in the footsteps of the US government, they should go over to South Florida and they should grab Juan Guaido and take him to Romania and say, hey, guess what? We got good news. We have a new Romanian president. Now, he doesn't exactly speak Romanian. It's kind of more like a broken kind of Spanish. But hey, what difference does it make? If he's good enough for Donald Trump, he's good enough for us. There you go, Romania. Juan Guaido, he's your guy. One other thing I'd like to say about the MAGA coalition, and this is important. The MAGA coalition is not what liberal America is making it out to be. Liberal America is making the MAGA coalition out to be a Donald Trump loving cult. But I was on Fox News back in 2010, and let me tell you what happened. 2008, I saw it with my own eyes. I talked to the people. I heard it. I was on the ground. 2008, after the crisis, a left force called Occupy opened up and started, and they had Occupy Wall Street, and it ended up getting usurped by, the agent provocateurs, and it just melted away. But you had another movement called the Tea Party, and it was fundamentally an economic movement. They were angry. At that time, it wasn't really cultural. They were angry about the buyouts. They were angry because Obama bailed out Wall Street and left them hanging and losing, and they lost everything. That was the Tea Party originally. The Tea Party then put a bunch of people in office in 2010, and what happened? They didn't change Washington. Washington changed them. They went there and they did what you do in Washington. They filled their filthy, stinking pockets with everything they could. They walked around. If it wasn't nailed down, they stole it. That's what happens in Washington, D.C. We know the game of corruption, and that's what they did. And the Tea Party was still angry, and they were still searching. And what do you know? Donald Trump, a guy he understands how to play an audience. And I'm not saying he's wrong or he's bad. I'm just saying he understands the dynamics of communication to large groups. Put it that way. And Donald Trump then kind of gave them a red hat and a nice new shiny name, MAGA, Make American Great Again, right? And he took the lead and they all said, there's our guy, and off he went, and that was MAGA. And what has happened recently is the MAGA coalition has grown, but it hasn't grown with people who love Donald Trump. I know black people that voted for Trump that can't stand him. I've had black people say, I don't like Trump, he's a racist, I'm voting for him. Why? Because they were sick and tired of being sick and tired. What did they want? They wanted peace. Two words, my friends. Peace and prosperity. That's all they ever want. And now when they wake up and they say, oh my gosh, Donald Trump's bombing a bunch of poor people again. I don't think I voted for that. Oh my gosh, the government's censoring a bunch of people that are saying things that the government doesn't like. I don't think I voted for that. This is all in the same week. When they look at this and they say, I wanted peace. Now, let me add something else to this. One of the other important things, Donald Trump said on the campaign trail, he said, look, sanctions are bad. Sanctions are going to ruin the dollar. We got to get rid of sanctions. And many of us were like, yeah, you finally figured that out. Good. Donald Trump figured it out. Like schmucks like me who have no background in business or anything else figured it out. I figured a guy like Donald Trump who went to like Wharton's Business School and ran corporations, I figured he'd see the light there. Donald Trump says, great, we got to get rid of those sanctions. How'd that work out? Donald Trump, as he got rid of the sanctions on Russia, he's talking about it. He just renewed some sanctions recently. What is he saying to Iran? Iran, you better cut it out. Otherwise what? You know the way it works. He says, we're going to clamp down on Iran. That means more sanctions. If you know that sanctions is going to destroy the dollar, it's one thing if you don't have knowledge. But if you come out and say to us, I know that sanctions are going to destroy the dollar, and you don't start getting rid of sanctions, it starts to look intentional. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that maybe you're running a coercive empire. You don't have the military wherewithal to dominate people anymore, and you only got one tool left. Well, if that tool is an economic suicide pill, you might want to look for another tool. One last thing I'll say before I go. My dear friend Caleb Maupin did a great video, and the name of the video was Designating Yemen's Houthis as a Terrorist is a Big Mistake. Caleb's a guy, you've seen him on the mother of all talk shows. He's a guy who supported Donald Trump's moves for peace, who's been out there saying, yes, go to North Korea, shake the hands of the leader of North Korea and get a deal. Go for it, Trump. I support it 100%. Out there with big pictures of Trump and Kim Jong-un. And what does he say? Hey, I think you made a mistake. And where are we again? Weren't we told that, we're not censoring on X and YouTube and all that kind of stuff? And all he said was, perhaps our foreign policy was an error. And what's YouTube's answer? Oh, no, you don't. You are not allowed to say that it's an error. I think the Trump administration needs to look in the mirror. They've only been in for 3 months. 12 weeks roughly? You've been here. And we're starting to see some of the stench of the Biden administration, the stench of an empire that's out of control. But you told us, Donald Trump, that you understand the errors. You told us that you saw them. If you repeat them, you don't have any excuse. Joe Biden, he was just wandering around aimlessly for no apparent reason. You said you knew what was going on and you understood it, Donald Trump. We expect different from you, and we will continue to watch and evaluate. You're watching the mother of all talk shows. I'm Garland Nixon, standing in for George Galloway.